In this video, we're going to be talking about the quadruped position. So specifically, we're going to try to fix these different types of faults that happen most commonly with individuals in the upper body and also the lower body. So these are great movements that we can actually be implementing in our training program, specifically in the preparation and also in primary and KPIs that we could be doing, just depending on each individual and what they need to be working on for their linchpin. So Gregory's going to go into a quadruped position, and we're going to go into kind of the first different types of things that we see most common with individuals. And most of the time, it's always about the congruency that we can keep our spine in a neutral position. But most of the time, what we always see is individuals start to dump at the pelvis. They go into an anterior pelvic tilt, and they start to excessively go into an extension of the lumbar spine. And we don't want these things to happen because we want the things to happen in our spine to be in a nice position so that we can prevent injuries from happening. Also, what we also see is like a rounded position where people go into such like that cow position that we basically provide that nice rounded spine at the or curvature of the spine, but we don't want that to happen either. I'm going to have Gregory kind of go into a little bit of like a neutral position. Also, another thing that we typically see is the cervical spine starts to drop a little bit more than we want it to. So the head starts to dump, and actually this is most common in these types of movements as well, as people don't necessarily lift up their head and keep it in a neutral position, because I'm going to have them raise it up a little bit now, raise it up a little bit more. We want it to be in that neutral position, but a lot of times people tend to drop it a little bit more. So now we're going to go into common different types of movements that we see: upper body and arm, extension with the hip, and then also we're going to combine both of those movements with the arm and the leg. But we're going to do a bad version and we're going to do a good version to help you guys out so that we can master these movements and enhance your movement when you're doing this in training. So the first one that we are going to do, we're going to show just a bad movement. Typically what we always see, we're going to go with the arm first. So we got a little dumping here. Typically most of the time people don't really get this extension going or the nice neutral position. Now go ahead and just provide that movement. A lot of times what they do is they dump this arm. They don't necessarily keep it in a nice level position. And they don't even really get the full range of motion in the arm. They actually just keep it down on an angle a little bit. So what I always like to even say is when we're doing these things, imagine that we got a balance beam here. We want to keep things nice and balanced so that when we're doing this movement, it's like having a glass of water on your back or shoulder blades, and you don't want that glass of water to fall off and get you wet. So another one that we typically see is the hip extension. So now what I'm going to have Gregory do is, a lot of people, what they do is when they kick this leg back, they go into now such an excessive lift of that leg. They're going into like excessive ranges of motion in the lumbar spine. They're getting their foot up as high as they can. And a lot of times people like to do this and they think it adds more benefit to the gluteus maximus and overall just the glute musculatures around that hip. But at the same time, our hips are only allowed to go into roughly about 10 degrees beyond hip extension. So we go negative 10 degrees at the hip extension, but a lot of people don't have that. It's because we're so tight in the anterior capsule. And also what I'm going to do is we're going to combine both of those, Gregory, now with our left leg. So we'll use our left leg and then we'll use our right arm. But now we're going to make it look bad. It's the same thing. This is typically what we see. It's uncontrolled. We don't really necessarily have the stability that we want, and it looks sloppy. It does not look clean. But now what we are going to do, we're going to fine tune these movements. So now we're going to show you the best ones and actually how to get these. But first, we got to create that internal tension. We got to make sure that we are thinking. We are providing that focus on each one of our movements so that we can prioritize movements to make it look safe and actually make it work the muscles that we want it to work. So Gregory, let's do our whole thing. We're going to make sure that we get our internal tension that we want. So he's going to start from the ground. He's gripping the ground as much as he can, squeezing that ground with his fingers. He's going to create tension in his lats, tension in his chest. Now from here, squeezing his glutes, pulling his knees together with those abductors. Big breath in, bracing at that belly, and then he's going to dial back just a little bit. So now you see he's got a nice level here, everything is nice and flat, but he's still keeping that tension. He's still shaking a little bit. Now let's go into just an arm movement. So this one, it's not necessarily going to be down. This is going to be prioritizing perfect movement. See, he's not dumping that shoulder. Let's go about one more after this one. And again, he's got that perfect full reach, bicep to the ear. Keeping that tension, now let's go into our left leg. So before we do this, we're going to go into now what I like to say is to keep his toes. A lot of times we get that range of motion where a lot of people want to bring their leg up, but most of the time we can only handle about that much with the leg before we start compensating in that low back. So keeping that tension, sliding now that foot, and here we can see that nice flat back that whole entire time, and he's not excessively lifting up that leg because his hips don't really allow that position. One more, and relax. Now what I'm gonna do, let's reset a little bit. I'm gonna move this out of the way for you. Perfect. Now from here, re-brace. Let's kind of re-get that CB3, locking everything in, doing our big brace, co-contraction, breathe, dial back a little bit, and then from here, we're gonna do these sides. Again, keeping everything. He's not gonna lift that leg too high. Perfect. Keeping everything here. Let's go one more, that's it, one more. Keeping that perfect position in the spine. Again, I hope this video helps you out to master that quadruped position. Again, we want to do things right so that we can prevent injury from happening. Again, these little teeny fine tuning of your movements are going to help prioritize the mastering of each movement and making sure that we're utilizing the muscles that we want. Again, protecting the spine, protecting the hips, protecting the neck, protecting the shoulders is our #1 cause in trying to master these movements. I hope this video helped you out.